Now, here's our 3 rings. We started with just bits and pieces and stock and some pretty minimal sketches, and we have 3 really interesting things going on here. Very, very divergent, yet they all started out from a similar place. And all we're doing is sawing and soldering, and thinking. That's the fun part, though. So, can't wait to see how these turn out. I'm just going to continue on all of them simultaneously, just detailing them. Smoothing surfaces, sanding, filing, getting rid of divots. You don't need to see me do all that. It's just tedious work, but it's kind of fun, and it's where the real, like I say, the fit and the finish comes in. And that's what elevates your work into something more than anyone else's. The transformation, though, is still going to be quite striking once we get our polishing, our finishing, and textures. We need to still solder in our little gold settings. That's going to change things. And then I always say that the last 5% of making a piece of jewelry that really makes it beautiful, and the 5% of the work. And that's true. Okay, now we have the oxidation is on all of the pieces except in the stone setting area. If you get some in there, just get in there with some little abrasive and get it out. And you're going to kind of shine up underneath the stones anyway with something. So get in there and do that. You might go in with a little end brush of some sort, even a little steel end brush, so that it just brightens. It doesn't have to be shiny, but you don't want it dull. You want to give your stones their best opportunity to shine. I'll set the stones, and then I'll remove the oxidation back to a level that I find pleasing, because I don't want an all black ring. It will wear off anyway on all the high spots of the ring. So you want to, you'll see. We'll get it done. Okay, next, set some stones. I'm going to set this pink tourmaline first. This is fine silver bezel material, so it's very, very soft. You shouldn't have any problem using a pusher of some sort to get your bezel to go over the stone. You want to have enough bezel. I trimmed them way back, but if the stone is curving like this, you have to have the bezel stick up above the curve enough so that it can clamp over it. So if your bezel's too short down here, you're not going to grab your stone well, and if it's too tall, you're going to have to put way too much material over the stone. So that's how much bezel I have, and it's the right amount. It's just, there you can see that angle. There's enough that just comes up, we'll be able to hold the stone securely. So here's some tools that people often use for setting in soft bezels. We have a pusher here, a rocking pusher. Here's a different shape of pusher, and here is a burnisher. I like, well, for this, I'd probably start with this pusher, but you can also use this rocking pusher. And let's see how we do. I'm going to put my stone back in. Okay. I will push initially, let's move this a little bit here. I will push initially from each end to secure the stone gently, and then from the sides so that you're sort of pinning the stone in place. Let's try this again. Okay, I'm going to hold it quite firmly, and then I'm going to push against, and you can see where the silver has gone a little flatter, it's a little bit pushed in toward the stone. Now the really important part with any stone setting operation is just don't slip with your tool and hit the stone. That's when you'll scratch your stone. So be really careful, go slowly, brace everything, come along. Now I'm on the other end, and I'm going to push and I'm sort of rocking, if you can see that, you're sort of rocking up. So I've got that end flattened against the stone as well. I'm going to come from this side over here, since I'm here, And I'm going to push it. Now it's a little bit flat against the stone. I'm going to come around the other side. So you're trying to equalize and do it symmetrically. Okay, you can see that. So I've got these little flattened areas, and then I just tend to keep the same pusher, and I just now go in between, back and forth, just like you're tightening up lug nuts or something like that. You want to just keep it even. If you push too much on one spot, the stone will go crooked, right? And then you have to pry it off, the bezel off the stone, and try to straighten things out. So go slow and one spot at a time. Go, if you do one side, go to the opposite side and give it a push. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to kind of push it and rock it up. I'm going to turn it, do the opposite side, push it and rock it up. This is soft material. It looks like a little bit of a wrinkled bezels, and those are not allowed. So I'm just going to keep gently pushing this until we get a nice, smooth looking bezel. Now, okay, you can come in and you can rock like with this curving end and rock that way. You know, for some reason, I just never got into that, but you can. I'll show you how you do it. And you push. I tend to slip with this more, but look, it made a really nice, smooth curve there. So I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. I'm going to push it and rock it along. And wow, that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah, okay, maybe you should use this rocker bezel pusher thing. I don't know. Let's just keep trying here. Pushing. Yeah, that's working good. What you don't want to do is scratch your setting, because you could, you know, put a scratch somewhere you don't like, then you have to go back and refinish and reoxidize. I have over here, it's bulging out, and then over here opposite. So I'm going to rock those places in. Just trying to do this so you can see it. That's a little stiff there because there's some solder up there that makes it not want to bend. Well, I suspect it's the same over here. So when you run into something that doesn't want to move for whatever reason, if you look at this tool here, this really dissipates your force, right? It spreads it out, which has been fine for the easy areas. But now that I've got a stiff area, I want to concentrate my pressure. So a smaller tip is going to give you basically more PSI, pounds per square inch, so to speak. So I might be able to just push it with this. And the other thing is, sometimes if you have a very slippery end, that can let you slip more easily. So I'm going to go along in here with a little bit of emery and kind of give it a texture, and that might help me not slip. The other thing you can do is put tape on your stone, which is a really good idea to protect it against slipping. But let's see how this works here. Okay, so I'm going to come straight in with this. I'm going to brace it and push against it. You might not see it well because my hands are going to get in the way. But it does push it right in to increase the pressure by changing the shape of your tool. And I'm just going to kind of go along little spots where I see a tiny bit of gap. You see how nice that went in right there? Really nice. Okay, I'm going to do it on the other side. So this, concentrating your pressure in a difficult area by changing your tool is a very important concept. So let's just go in and push this one in. Okay, that's good. And right here. So I'm going to look at it and see if I see any gaps. And I'm looking with my Optivisor so I can really see. It's really tight. If you tap it, I hear just a little tiny tap. So it means the little gaps are actually keeping it from getting tight. So I'm just going to go along with this tool. If you're pushing in from the side, that may not be the right pressure to move the silver onto the stone well enough. So I'm going to change the angle and come in a little steeper so that the actual top edge is pushed down onto the stone, onto that curve of the stone better. Be very careful that you don't hit the stone with your tool. You might need to rock it slightly like that. And I can see I've closed that little gap. It's just a tiny gap. I'm going to go along and close that gap everywhere. Just a little pushing and rocking and at the right angle. Next thing is to clean this up. I would go in with, if you have a lot, if you have a lot of tool marks, from your pusher on your bezel, you can go in with various things. You can go in with a safe barrette file, like where you have teeth on one side and you've polished this edge. Here's it. You have a barrette file which has this angled back with no teeth. It has teeth on the front. You take this side edge and you sand it smooth and then high polish it so that there's no teeth or abrasive quality to it. You come along and you carefully file along. That is good, but you've got to be careful not to scratch your stone, and some stones scratch really carefully. Some stones scratch really easily. Also, don't slip and take some of your oxidation off. But you can do that. You can come in with a rubberized polishing wheel of some sort. Many of those will scratch your gems. A pumice wheel won't scratch most gems. Certainly do not come in with a sanding disc or anything like that. You will scratch your gems. A hard felt with a bit of tripoli on it is good. The other thing is you can come in with your thumbnail basically and protect your stone to a large degree as you come along and file against that bezel like that. Come in. So I would do any number of those or actually this way is good too with this fingernail. It's a little easier to get into. So just go along, protect your stone, and file that. Or again, just using a pumice wheel or a hard felt with some tripoli. Polish your bezel without scratching your stone. And one thing I didn't mention is when you solder a bezel together that has points, it seems, or square corners, it seems logical that you would put a seam in the corner. But if you do that, then you can't bend it well. The soldered seam will not bend like the rest of the bezel, and it will cause you some problems. So I tend to put the seam anywhere else but on a corner. That way you don't get into the setting and have that problem. I need to do a little trimming on this one, and so we'll be right back. I have set the stones. I polished up around the gems themselves, the bezels, and smoothed all the divots out, went back and took out any little tool marks that I didn't want, because inevitably there will be some on your bezel. And then I found that even just by handling these rings, that some of the oxidation was already wearing off. So I went back and put a little bit more in. Now the type of oxidation I'm using is called Goseba. You can use liver of sulfur. You can use the some of the commercial ones that come already pre-mixed. You paint on with a brush. I can't remember what they're called. You can use anything you like. I like the Goseba. It's something I've only become aware of recently. You can use it cold, and it paints on beautifully. It's a really nice product. Now I'm going to selectively polish, not really polish, I'm just going to remove some of the oxidation. You know what I do want to do is on the inside of the rings, I did put a lot of oxidation in there. I am going to go in with some Scotch-Brite and just do a satin finish in there. I'm not going to worry about these being high polish inside the ring shank because these are rustic looking rings. So there's no reason to high polish. I'm going to go for a satin finish. I use some Scotch-Brite on a little mandrel. Scotch-Brite is your, just what it sounds like. It's stuff you scrub pots and pans with. You can buy it in a sheet and you can mount it on wheels. It comes mounted as well. And just go into the inside of the ring shank. You can do it by hand and it just will zip like that, take off your oxidation. Now you don't have to take all of it off. Take off as much as you like. I want it to still look kind of rustic. I don't want it to turn someone's finger black. So that's kind of all there is to that. And make sure you then make it even. I'm not using a high RPM because it's coming right off, which is why you can just take, you can even use this piece of sandpaper, but you can just take a piece of Scotch-Brite. Like here's a piece. You can just do the same thing with your finger. Go in and do this, which, okay, we'll do it on this one. That's easy enough. And it looks nice. It leaves a hair of oxidation in there, but it finishes it. Makes it look finished. So remember, what elevates our work is how we finish things. So just pay attention to the details. Don't leave inconsistent areas, divots, file marks, unpolished, anything that detracts from your presentation. I'm going to go on in with my flexible shaft. And if somebody's paying attention, they have noticed I'm wearing the ring with the same shank. Only this ring I carved in wax and cast, and this one we fabricated. Pretty cool, huh? This goes to jewelry as sculpture. This is a piece, I'm just going to take a segue here because I love this piece. I made it for me because I love the gemstones. But you can see the idea behind it was to make it interesting from every angle. And so I carved this wax and I put steps and V's and different things in there. And then different levels. And then after I cast the sterling silver, I soldered on the 18 karat overlay. And I was very happy with how it all came out. It's really a pretty stone. So here we go. That's the inspiration for this ring shank. We're going to sign it. We're going to put a sterling. You could have stamped it if you had a stamp. I did, but I didn't stamp it, so we have to go in and, if you're going to put a carat or a metal content mark in there, you have to put your maker's mark. So put it all or put nothing. I'm going to put sterling, and I don't know if there's really enough gold to bother with putting gold as a content, but then I'll put my initials, or I might say M. Wong, and I'll do it with a little ball burr, and it will look very nice. Put it up on the side somewhere, or on this ring you could do it up inside on the back side of the reticulated part. That would look pretty artsy, huh? Since we made a little art piece, may as well follow through, make someone believe it's art. It took me years before I was not squeamish at somebody calling me an artist. Probably about 15 years of making jewelry before I was comfortable with that. I don't know why maybe I didn't feel accomplished enough. Okay, so now I've got that one, and did we do this one? I'll just finish this out by hand. Give it a little twist. Okay. Now, to finish the rest of this and take off the oxidation I'm going to use something, these are little polishing, they're like foam, little dense foam. It comes from Rio Grande. And they are great for removing oxidation without putting a high polish. If I want to remove some of this oxidation, I'll come in with this and I'll just kind of rub it a little bit at a time. You can see it's coming off. It's going to leave the oxidation in the recesses, and it's going to give you kind of the highlights. Now I did leave it a little bit shiny. I told you I left it a little bit shiny right around the gem, and I like that. So that's just going to peek out and be a little bit shiny to draw your eye right over to that gem. People really like the oxidized look. For so many years we worked hard at making things beautiful and shiny and reflective, and now people come in and say, no, that's too fancy. They don't want to see shiny gold. They want to see textures and darkness. That's okay. It's a trend. We can do it. This looks like it's been kicking around on the beach for about 5 years. No. So you see some color change from dark end to the light end and then to the dark stone. And it kind of looks like a found object, doesn't it? That's something else. Okay, let's do another one. Let's work on this pink one here. And we're just, this area, let's do the area in between in the V first and kind of scrub that out a little bit. Not all the way, because what you really want is that oxidation to show up that texture. Yeah, you want that texture to retain some oxidation and there's some depth. So just judiciously go in and take, oh yeah, that looks really nice, doesn't it? So we don't want to take a lot of the oxidation off the Y, the split shank, because we want it to stay in contrast, I think. And it makes that little gold ball show up. That looks kind of nice, huh? Ooh, yeah, look at those textures. Super nice. Okay. Then if you like your bezel shiny, definitely go in and make sure that's a little bit shiny. I like my bezels shiny, actually. So I'm going to leave this ring pretty dark. I love the dark and the pink. So let's not get too carried away up here. Yes, that's gorgeous. That's just really pretty. Okay, I want to make sure and get this bezel a little bit shiny. I see a little tool mark there that I wasn't very careful about, was I? I could always go back in and fix that. Try to catch those before you get where you think you are finished. Oh yeah. I'm loving that. Let's see. Let's do the shank first, and then we'll work on the top. I'm just going to not take a ton off of here. Just brighten it up. Okay, I'm going to do my sides. Just brighten those up a little bit. I want to just make it look consistent, whatever you do. Okay. Okay. Now, we know we like our bezel a little bit shiny. Not the smoothest bezel on the sides, I have to say. That could have done a little better there, but let's make sure that tippy top of the bezel is shiny using my fingernail. Ooh. Okay, now what do we want to do? Do we want to make these little squares a little shiny? Ooh, just a little bit. Make them pop. Make those little, yeah, I like that. So let's make this little square pop. Okay, we got little squares that pop. Let's take a hair off of, there's a little bit of just a little bit of brushing off on these rails. Go in the same direction, don't change your grain there, except here we're going to go down this way. Yes. Okay. Now I'm going to, the 18 karat looks a little off to me. I'm going to just pop that a little bit. Now, how much do we take off of this reticulation? We're going to just take it off the high spots. See what happens. It's going to make the shape just really make it very landscapey, which is going to be super cool. Look at that. Yes, I love it. So cool. Could be a pendant. This, for the kind of the afterthought of the whole thing, I love this piece. It came out really great. Okay, because I have a less than stellar bezel, side of a bezel here, I got some inconsistencies there. I wasn't being super careful. I may go in and put some texture on there to camouflage it. You'll find texture and oxidation can be your friend if you have an imperfect surface, like maybe there pits show up, or you know, just something's not quite right. You can unify things with texture and oxidation. Although you probably noticed that I went along and had everything pretty well polished before I textured. Texture isn't going to hide anything major in terms of an imperfection. So don't count on that. Well, I just like that. I like how that looks. I like, let's see, well, it sits a little bit crooked, but that wasn't really a goal to make it stand up, but there you go. So we now have three, I think, pretty dramatic rings, and they all started out kind of the same, didn't they? And then they changed. They morphed, they evolved. The transformation. So this just goes to show you that you can do a lot with some really basic skills. This was sawing and soldering. Throw in some pliers and a little imagination, and you can really go somewhere. You can take a band and a bezel and make it so much more. Here's this piece. These sketches were really simple. They did not tell us everything we were going to do at all, and I made a lot of changes along the way. And I'll tell you right now, if you give any sketch, I don't care how detailed it is, to 3 different people, you will get 3 different projects. They will not be the same. So this is the other one. Again, we didn't really have much fleshed out in this sketch, but this really, I think, turned out to have some really great lines. Made decisions along the way. Then here's our surprise. Wow. Started out up here and completely went a different direction down here. Found an interesting way to utilize the material. I think that showed it off much better by giving it some contrast with the kind of the framework, and then creating a really interesting ring shank style that gave us the opportunity to do some construction that's a little more interesting. So just remember, these are your projects. You design it, you make it, and keep it interesting. All of these pieces started with the same raw materials. Some nice shank material and a nice gauge, so that we had something to work with, something to sculpt and carve and bend, and a piece of texture of some sort. It could be anything. I used reticulation, I used a roller printed piece. This is a piece I hammered into concrete with from the backside, face down with a hammer, and pulled it up, and I have this cool piece of texture. That would have been a nice piece to work with, and here's some bezel material. So by thinking beyond the band and the bezel, we've created something so much more. We've created sculpture, wearable sculpture, and these will draw people's attention. They're unusual, they're one of a kind, they were fun to make, and for me, that's a bottom line. If I'm going to spend time making things and it's not specific for a person or a type of job, I want to have fun. I want to, use shapes and relationships and create something interesting. And so I think we've accomplished that here. And I'm glad you came along for the ride.